something ain't adding up. I mean it. Something ain't adding up, and once the whole picture drops on your lap the way it just dropped on mine, you're gonna sit back in that chair and ask how in the world we got here this fast. Because right now, right this second, an entire corner of the culture is standing in the middle of a mess they walked into with their eyes wide open, and not a single person involved is even close to ready for the bill that's about to hit the table. This whole situation is about to get loud in a way people ain't seen in a minute, and if you're ready to see how the last thread in the seam just snapped clean in half, and if you want to know why a professional radio interview turned into a full-blown war between a world champion and a woman who's been on the mic longer than most of y'all been driving, then tap that like button, lock in the sub, and push this one out, because we are getting into every corner of this thing today. Now hold up. Before we even name a single name, let me tell you what's really going on here, because the surface story ain't the story. The surface story is that a radio host asked a fighter a fair question. The real story is that a champion decided to answer a fair question with a live stream, a lawyer, a band from the arena stunt, and a private threat pipeline that a whole team of professionals had to warn her target about. That's the real story. And once you see the shape of it, you're going to understand why the internet flipped on this the way it did, and why the woman everyone thought was in the driver's seat is looking more and more like she's the one riding shotgun in somebody else's mess. Let me set the table. Miss Shaikica, veteran radio personality out of Atlanta. More than 20 years on the mic, syndicated, respected, the kind of voice that shows up for the culture without turning every interview into a highlight reel for her own brand. She sits down with the undisputed champion herself, Clarissa Shields. It's supposed to be a promo run for the August 15th card at State Farm Arena in Atlanta. Fight week energy, cross-promotion, 2 black women in the same room, one of them a boxer, the other one a broadcaster, and both of them at the top of what they do. That's the setup. That's the frame. And in the middle of the sit-down, Miss Shaikica asks a question that any grown woman in that studio was going to ask sooner or later. She asked Clarissa Shields how long she was willing to be in a relationship with a man whose divorce isn't finalized. Word for word, she leaned in like an older sister and asked how long Clarissa Shields was willing to let this situation overshadow her career. That's the question. That's the whole question. And she didn't ambush her with it either. She walked into it soft. She said, "I've been here before, sister to sister, I get it." She built a bridge before she walked across it. Clarissa Shields answered. And in the moment, she answered with a little sass, a little edge, but she answered. She said Papoose filed for divorce. She said he's serious about her. She said the word husband doesn't apply anymore because the paperwork is moving. She said the narrative is unfair because nobody's holding his ex accountable for what she's doing on her end. And that answer right there in the studio was going to be the whole thing. That was going to be the end of it. A fair question, a firm answer, a handshake, some pictures for the promo, and everybody goes home. That's how it was supposed to end. That is not how it ended. Because after the interview, Clarissa Shields went home. She logged onto her phone, and she started reading the comments. And every single one of those comments started telling her the same story. They started telling her she got played. They started telling her the radio host tried her. They started telling her she should have gone off. And Clarissa Shields, world champion, undisputed, decorated, one of the greatest boxers of her generation, sat there and let the comment section rewrite her memory of what happened in that room. That's the moment the whole thing turned. Not the question. Not the answer. The comments. The comments got in her ear, and by the time she opened her live stream that night, she wasn't the same person who left the studio a few hours earlier. She went live and she went off. And the first shot out the gate was not a professional response. It was not a measured clarification. It was a personal insult aimed at the physical appearance of a woman who had been nothing but respectful to her face. She called Miss Shaikica a fat ass. Straight up. Then she pushed it further, called her Miss Piggy, called her Bigfoot, called her every name in a book she wasn't supposed to be reading in the first place. And in the same breath, she claimed over and over again that she had checked Miss Shaikica in that interview, that she had put her in her place, that she had handled it right there in the room. And I want you to hear me on this because this is important. She did not check anybody. She answered a question with a little bit of attitude. Attitude is not a check. Attitude is a caption. A check is when the other person sits down and doesn't get up. Miss Shaikica never sat down. So Clarissa Shields walked out of a studio thinking she gave a firm answer, and she walked into a live stream convinced she gave a knockout. The comment section handed her a highlight reel she never actually filmed. And here's where it gets crazy. Because the moment those clips left her phone and hit the timeline, they did not just travel. They multiplied. Every blog picked them up. Every gossip page ran with them. Every commentary channel in the culture opened their next video with the same 3 seconds of a champion boxer calling a radio veteran a fat ass, over and over and over on repeat, for a full news cycle. That is not a viral moment. That is a stain. That is the kind of clip that gets pinned to a name for the rest of a career, and no belt in the world washes it off. Endorsements read those clips. Networks read those clips. Sponsors read those clips. And every single one of them files it in the same folder, the folder labeled risk. And once your name lands in that folder, it does not leave. It just sits there, quietly, next to every other name that let a live stream write the last chapter of their story. The next morning, Miss Shaikica goes on Young Chunk Industries' morning takeover. She addresses it. And she addresses it clean. She says she asked the question from a place of care. She says the way this young lady was introduced to her attention was through her being on the phone with somebody else's husband, and once she put those pieces together, she wanted to know, sister to sister, how long that was going to overshadow a career this bright. She said she didn't think it was an attack. She said she thought the interview went well. She even said they took pictures, they had a little banter, Clarissa joked about arm wrestling her, they smiled, it was cool. So on the radio, Miss Shaikica kept it cute. She said God was working on her. She said she wouldn't have handled it differently. She said the woman she interviewed was a beautiful girl, a talented girl, a girl at the top of her field, and she meant every word. Then she left the radio show. And that's when she found out how deep this thing actually ran. Because behind the scenes, before Miss Shaikica ever went live herself, the threats had already started. Not from Clarissa Shields directly on camera. From people around her. People from Miss Shaikica's team, professionals who work in the same building, were pulled aside and told, watch the comments, watch your back. She's with this person, she's with that person, be careful. That is not a professional disagreement. That is a pressure campaign. And that is the exact moment Miss Shaikica decided the interview was no longer the interview. It became something else. It became a defense of her own name. So she went live that night at 8:30. And this is where the whole thing turned into something the culture is going to be talking about for weeks. Because Miss Shaikica did not go on that stream to trade insults. She went on that stream to lay down a record. She said, let me be clear, I am not Michelle Obama, we can take this all the way to hell. She said no more free promo for a fight nobody's anticipating. She said the tickets ain't moving. She said the arena ain't sold. She said pay for advertisement next time. And every single sentence she dropped was a headline on its own. Then she pulled out the receipt that most people missed. She said Papoose might not be your manager, but what does he do for a living? She said it twice. She said it 3 times. She said, ma'am, little ma'am, do not play with me. Because here is the thing everybody in that studio and everybody watching already knew, but nobody was willing to say out loud. If the man is not the manager, and the man is not the promoter, and the man is not the trainer, and the man is not the sponsor, and the fighter is the one with the belts and the bag, then what exactly is the arrangement? That is not a question with a clean answer. That is a question that gets deleted from group chats. And Miss Shaikica did not just leave it there. She went further. She said, you banning me from coming to the State Farm Arena in my own city is absolutely incredibly adventurous of you. Adventurous. That was the word. Adventurous. And I want you to sit with that word for a second, because the entire live stream turned on that single word. Because Miss Shaikica just told a world champion, in her own home market, in her own arena, on her own night, that trying to freeze out a 20-year radio veteran from a room the city built together was not smart. It was not tough. It was adventurous. And in that context, adventurous doesn't mean brave. Adventurous means reckless. Adventurous means you have no idea what you're walking into. Peep this. Because this is where the picture gets bigger than the two of them. And this is the part where a lot of people are going to want to look away. But I need you to stay locked in with me because the receipts on the ground are actually louder than the receipts on the timeline. Multiple people who work in that same radio building have already gone on record, off the record, in the hallways, in the DMs, and everywhere in between saying the same thing. They are saying Miss Shaikica has never done this. They are saying in 20 years she has never taken a beef public with a guest. They are saying the reason she went live in the first place was because the pressure came for her before she ever picked up the phone. That matters. That context matters. Because when a person with a spotless 20-year run finally decides to open the door on somebody, the door was not opened for a reason you can dismiss in a caption. The door was opened because the room behind it got too loud to ignore. Because underneath this entire story is a name nobody in that studio said out loud, but everybody in that comment section was thinking. Remy Ma, his wife, the woman who is still legally married to the man who filed for a divorce. And Remy Ma has already spoken on this. She's already said that the delay in the paperwork is not about her. She's already made it clear that the moment the man in the middle stops asking for what he's asking for, the pen moves and the ink dries. So when Clarissa Shields walks in front of a camera and tells the world that Papoose filed for divorce because he is serious about her, she is telling half of a sentence. And the other half of that sentence is being written by a woman who has been in the culture longer than this entire news cycle has existed. That is the trap. That is what Miss Shaikica saw from across the table when she asked the question. She was not asking about a boyfriend. She was asking about a situation. She was asking a young champion, at the top of a historic career, why she was allowing a piece of somebody else's unfinished business to become the loudest headline attached to her name. She was asking her, in the softest voice a veteran can use, if the trade was worth it. And the answer she got back was sass in the studio and slander on the live stream. And now we are here. Let me walk you through what has been sent to my attention, because the story keeps growing. Miss Shaikica has confirmed she has retained her attorney, not because she wants a courtroom, because the record has to be clean. She has stated on camera that Clarissa Shields lied on her. She has stated that the threats came through her professional network. She has stated that she never once called Clarissa Shields out of her name during the original radio segment. And if you go back and watch that segment, you will not find a single insult in her mouth. Not one. And she is now in a position where she has to defend her name, her reputation, her 20-year run on the mic, and her ability to walk into an arena in her own hometown, all because a champion boxer let a comment section convince her she needed to swing at somebody who never threw a punch. And this is the part where I want to get real with you for a second. Because I keep hearing people online say Miss Shaikica came at Clarissa Shields disrespectfully. I keep hearing people say the question was inappropriate. I keep hearing people call it an attack. And I have gone back through the interview more than one time now, and I am telling you on my life that question was not an attack. That question was a hand extended. That question was the exact kind of question a grown woman asks another grown woman when she sees her about to walk into a wall she doesn't have to walk into. The idea that asking a fighter about the biggest storyline attached to her name is somehow out of pocket is the kind of take that only makes sense if you already decided who the villain was before the tape started rolling. And that is the whole issue. A whole lot of people decided who the villain was before the tape started rolling. They saw a radio host and a champion and they picked a side based on the belt count. That is not how this works. The belt does not answer the question. The belt does not finalize the divorce. The belt does not make a live stream a check. The belt does not make an insult a clapback. The belt is a belt. Everything else is choices. And the choices Clarissa Shields is making right now in real time in front of millions of people are the exact choices that turn a great career into a caption underneath somebody else's headline. Alright, bottom line. Let me tell you where this actually goes from here because I have been watching this exact pattern in the culture for years, and I can tell you how it ends before it ends. This ends one of two ways. Either Papoose stops asking for what he's asking for, the paperwork moves, the divorce finalizes, and this whole thing becomes a footnote in a career that keeps going. Or the paperwork stalls, the situation drags, and every single fight card, every press run, every red carpet, every interview from now until the end of this run becomes another opportunity for somebody to ask the exact same question Miss Shaikica asked. Because that question is not going away. That question was going to get asked eventually by somebody. It just happened to get asked by the woman who was too seasoned to be intimidated by the answer. And here's the piece nobody wants to say out loud. In a boxing ring, Clarissa Shields would handle almost anybody the sport puts in front of her. That is not a debate. That is a fact. But this is not a boxing ring. This is the internet. This is the radio. This is the culture. And in this arena, the tools that win you world titles are the exact tools that lose you news cycles. Aggression works in 12 3-minute rounds. It does not work in a 12-week press storm. Because in a press storm, every punch you throw at somebody who never punched back becomes the clip. Every insult you send at somebody who kept it professional becomes the headline. Every ban you announce at somebody who has a syndicated show becomes the story that lives longer than the fight itself. You cannot knock out a narrative. You have to outlast it. And outlasting a narrative requires the exact thing this situation has been begging for from day one, which is silence. Silence would have ended this. Silence in the studio, silence on the live stream, silence on the caption. Silence would have taken the question, answered it once, and moved on. Instead, we got a live stream. We got a name-calling clinic. We got a ban from an arena. We got threats through third parties. We got a lawyer on retainer. We got a second live stream from the other side that laid out every receipt in order. And now we have a fight card on August 15th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta that is being sold to the public inside the loudest cloud of drama attached to any woman's name in combat sports right now. And Miss Shaikica said it herself on the record on her own live. Pay for advertisement next time. If you're still rolling with me right now, I want you to lock in on this next part because this is the piece that is going to matter 6 months from now when we look back at this whole thing. Miss Shaikica did not want this. She said it. She said her family didn't want her to say anything. She said her friends didn't want her to say anything. She said if she had to stand alone, she would. But she wasn't going to keep letting a champion disrespect her without answering the record. That is not a woman looking for a fight. That is a woman defending a career. And there is a very old, very quiet rule in this business, and the rule is that you never mistake somebody's calm for weakness. Because when a person who has been on the microphone for 20 years finally decides to say something all the way out loud, they are not guessing at their words. They are placing them. And every word Miss Shaikica placed on that live stream is now part of the public record forever. There is no unsaying adventurous. There is no unsaying what does he do for a living. There is no unsaying pay for advertisement next time. And I want to layer one more piece on top of this, because it has not been said enough. Miss Shaikica has been on the ground in Atlanta for 2 decades. She is embedded in the same market that is supposed to be hosting this fight. She is not a stranger walking into somebody else's arena. She is the arena. She is the voice that helps build the crowds, that help sell the tickets, that help move the merch, that help pay the fighters that walk out on that same floor. And the moment you decide to freeze out a person like that, from a room like that, in a city like that, you have not made an enemy. You have made a statement. And the statement you have made is that you do not understand the difference between a champion in a ring and a champion in a market. Those are 2 different belts. And Miss Shaikica has been wearing hers since before Clarissa Shields ever laced up her first pair of gloves as a professional. And so we sit here today, less than a week out from the biggest fight of the year for one of the greatest boxers of her generation. And instead of the conversation being about the opponent, the training camp, the tape study, the legacy, the belts, we are talking about a radio interview that should have been a promo run. That is the cost. That is the receipt. And that receipt is not going to be paid by the radio host. That receipt is going to be paid by every ticket that doesn't move, every endorsement that hesitates, every brand that reads the room and decides to sit this one out. Now let me tell you what I actually believe is coming next, because I have been calling these cycles for a long time, and this one has a very familiar shape to it. I believe Papoose does not stay in this situation. I believe the wife across the street is not going anywhere. I believe the paperwork does not move the way this camp keeps telling us it's about to move. And I believe 6 months from now, 12 months from now, the woman standing in the middle of the storyline is going to look up and realize the loudest voice defending the arrangement was her own, and the quietest voice was the one holding the pen. That is the shape of it. That is where this is heading. And I am on record right now saying it out loud so that when it lands, you already heard it here first. Alright, we are going to close this one out, but I want to give you a couple of things to think about because this whole story is bigger than the 2 women in the middle of it. Ask yourself, honestly, why the comment section had more influence on the champion's response than the actual interview did. Ask yourself why a professional broadcaster with 2 decades of receipts had to hire an attorney to protect her name from a person she interviewed one time. Ask yourself why the fight card in the middle of all of this is being sold inside a cloud that has nothing to do with the sport. And drop your answer in the comments because I want to see how the room is reading this, and I want to see who is watching the same picture I am watching. Tap that like button if you rolled with me the whole way through. Lock in the subscribe if you are new around here because the next chapter of the story is already loading, and when it lands, we are getting into every single piece of it the same way we got into this one. Push this video out to somebody who needs to see the whole picture, not just the clip. And I have got a follow-up already sitting on deck about exactly what happens the night of August 15th at State Farm Arena. Because if the pattern holds, that arena is about to become the biggest storyline in combat sports for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the fight itself. It's right there on your screen. Go watch it next. I will see you in that one.